Hello there, and welcome to everyone who's joining us for today's FOCA Lunch and Learn webinar on FireSmart tips for the 2024 cottage season, ways to increase your property's resistance to wildland fire. We will be recording today's event, and you will receive a copy of these slides, and so we will get things underway. If I could have the next slide, please. We start this meeting by recognizing and thanking the traditional stewards of the lands and waterways where we work and live. The waterfront lands of Ontario are the traditional territories of many diverse Indigenous peoples who recognize the sacredness of water, the interconnectedness of all life, and the importance of protecting land and water for the generations yet to come. We're all on a journey toward truth and reconciliation, and we offer this recognition as an important step in that journey. We're joining this virtual meeting from different locations, and I encourage each of you to dedicate yourselves to move forward in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, learning, and sharing that learning. Next slide, please. My name's Michelle Lewin, and I'm Focus Manager of Communications and Development. And I am joined in our webinar today both by my colleague Adam Edwards, who is Focus Membership Coordinator, and by our new CEO, Leslie Lavender, who are assisting behind the scenes. Thank you both. Next slide. To start, in the Zoom format, all of you are here as attendees. We have 150 people registered to participate today, and you are muted. You can, however, type a question to our speaker. If you mouse over your screen or click if you're on an iDevice, you'll open up a window where you can type your question and hit enter to submit it, and we will have a Q&A session later in our event. If you experience technical difficulties, for example, if the audio cuts out or is lagging, we recommend that you close the Zoom window completely and just re-enter using the link that you were sent initially. That solves 9 out of 10 Zoom problems. Every registrant will receive a follow-up email from FOCA tomorrow, which will contain a copy of the slides shown and a link to the recording. We do encourage you to share all this information with others at your waterfront. We have lots of folks registered, and because this is a webinar that's open to the general public, we know that some of you may not be very familiar with FOCUS, so we're going to take 5 minutes to start and give you a little bit of information about our work. So if I could have the next slide, please. FOCUS, the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Associations, and for 60 years, we've been the voice of the Ontario waterfront. Altogether, we have over 525 member groups, and if you're in a member association, you are a FOCA member. Next slide, please. FOCA works on the issues that matter both to waterfront owners and lake associations and road associations, but also to the general health of the environment of Ontario's waterways. We are the voice to government, to the media, to our science and research partners, and we're the hub of a network of lake association knowledge all across the province. Next slide. As members, you receive benefits. Many of our benefits are directed to your member association, such as best practices and templates and network peer contacts, but also dollar benefits, such as a discount on the association liability insurance that's offered through Cade Associates Insurance Brokers and underwritten by Aviva Canada. Many, I would say 80+% of our member groups do carry insurance for the work that they do on their landscapes. And we encourage you to get a quote from Cade if you aren't already covered. Some of our benefits are for the member families, and that includes access to another insurance product, which is called Cottage First. It's the first group insurance product by cottagers for cottagers. It is underwritten by Travelers Canada, but is also administered by Cade Associates Insurance Brokers. And you can cover your car, your boat, your cottage, your ATV, all kinds of things. We do encourage you to get a quote when one of your insurance pieces comes up for renewal, as our members have reported significant savings and improved coverages. There are also other offers, and the most special one we've just announced this month is a new Rogers preferred pricing program for FOCA members. So if you do want to access these deals, you will need your FOCA member login, and that you can get from your association's contact person. But if you have any difficulties, reach out to the FOCA office for assistance. Next slide, please. Members also attend our FOCA events at the member price or free in the case of our public webinars like this one, or our cottage succession seminars, which help our members learn how to keep the cottage in the family for the next generation. Next slide. And on that important topic, I should also say FOCA's environmental programs include preventative measures to prevent the spread of things like grass carp, which is a threat for our Great Lakes, Phragmites, which unfortunately is a threat almost everywhere in Ontario, and to do water sampling through the Lake Partner Program, which is a long-standing volunteer effort to sample inland water lakes of Ontario. Next slide, please. So I got my slides reversed there because when I was talking about cottage succession, I wanted to mention there has been an important development in the budget announcement in mid-April. The federal government has proposed to increase capital gains tax, and this will impact anyone who is a seasonal property owner when you transfer the cottage to the kids. Even if it's gifted and no money changes hands, the capital gains tax applies. FOCA has written to the government to express our dismay at the impact on middle-class families of this decision, and we encourage you to write your MP as well. Please get a template letter from our webpage and copy FOCA on your letters. Next slide, please. So FOCA advocates, communicates, and educates across Ontario throughout the year, year-round, on behalf of messaging for thriving and sustainable waterfronts now and for the next generations. Next slide, please. We encourage you to use FOCA's print and digital and video productions to spread these messages. We have materials on just about every topic related to cottage country, whether it's septic systems, wake impacts, invasive species, the importance of healthy shorelines, and how to get them. Next slide. We also have resources for those who are new to the waterfront, or if you have folks around your waterfront who are renting, we have a welcome sheet that you can present and customize, suggest that they perhaps provide this to their renters so that folks are aware of their impacts. Things like how sound travels over the water, perhaps garbage doesn't get picked up the way they're used to in the city when they're at the cottage, etc. Next slide, please. And of course, we have lots of resources about emergency preparedness. Since we're in rural and remote areas, it's extremely important for all of us to be prepared in the face of increasingly challenging weather conditions and also things like fire and flood. So for today, that's our lead in to our topic, which is, of course, fire safety. With that, I think I'm going to ask Adam to stop sharing his slides, and I'll invite Shane to start. Now, Shane McCool is a fire advisor with the Aviation, Forest Fire, and Emergency Services branch of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And having spit all of that out of my mouth, I turn it over to you, Shane.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And that was a great introduction. And I'm very happy to be here to speak to all you folks about this important topic. And as Michelle mentioned, I'm the fire advisor for the Northeast region. And one of my files consists of the FireSmart program, which we're working hard to grow here in Ontario to catch up to some of our western provinces who have really taken this program, implemented it, and have started to make some really excellent strides towards wildland fire mitigation and impacts to communities that are confronted with wildland fires. So really what the FireSmart program consists of is really some pillars, including education, emergency management, emergency planning, vegetation management, legislation, interagency cooperation, and cross-training are really some of the pillars that FireSmart focuses on. But just to get into the presentation here, really what the program is doing, the focus of FireSmart is around structural ignition prevention. So we're aiming to prevent structures from burning, but we're not looking to necessarily eliminate wildland fires. We know that wildland fires are an essential part of Ontario's ecological of the forest, and there's many species such as jack pine, for example, that require almost require forest fires to help them germinate their seeds and things of that nature. And so we know that there's a huge benefit to having fire on the landscape, but we also know that there's a huge danger in when we see fires sort of transition into the wildland urban interface, which we'll talk about here throughout the presentation. So wanting to allow fires to burn, but wanting to avoid the dangerous, costly losses that can occur when those fires move into communities is one of the goals of the FireSmart program. So the good news here is that a relatively small amount of fuel reduction work in the ignition zone, which we'll talk about in the home ignition zone, decreases structural ignitability. So even when we have those high intensity crown fires, a lot of folks are under the impression that there isn't much we can do to reduce our risks. When in reality, there are quite a few things that we can do to help increase our chances of survivability from a major wildland fire. So one of the things that strikes me from the FireSmart program is some of the research that came out from the U.S. Fire Service, FS rather, and Jack Cohen in particular. They're spending a number of years researching this area, and what they found is that 85 to 90% of homes without flammable roofs and that have a 10 to 20 meter clearance from the forested area, they can survive major wildland fires in high numbers. And the research is also showing that it's not necessarily the big flames that come through and burn down areas. It's a lot of the little things that transition and ignite homes. And when I mention little things, I'm looking at specifically ember transfer and how embers account for a major part of home ignitions and the losses associated with that. And with that, that brings me to a quick video that I'd like to share with you folks here. And this one here has no sound, but it is an excellent video to sort of help situate us with the FireSmart program in embers. And so I'll give a brief description here. There's a wildfire test through this research center's lab, and they designed it to demonstrate structural ignitability through the transfer of embers. And what you're looking at here is a test home. They've loaded some combustible pine bark, mulch, and wood dowels into a burn chamber. Oops, so there's a little bit of sound here at this part, but so you can see the researchers getting ready with plants and landscaping materials, placing them around the test home to give you a real world simulation. So you can see the mulch going in the area, and they're using a large fan with wind simulating the 10 to 20 miles per hour. So this is essentially demonstrating the impacts that a wildland fire would have on a home. So we start to see some ignition occurring around where they put the vegetation, as well as up on the vinyl gutters, if you will. And we can see that the asphalt shingles on the roof are Class A rated, which really is a good type of shingle for this particular test. So this is the embers entering into the home through the venting system. And we can see that this is a huge hazard, as once those embers get into the home, they have a huge potential for igniting the home from the inside out. Um, and the same goes for open windows. And you can see that screen will melt off quickly, and then allowing for that flame to contact any materials inside of that window. So essentially, what I wanted to show with this video is really just that, was the impact of embers on the home itself. A lot of folks, as I mentioned earlier, are looking at the large flames as the primary source of ignition. And yes, those large flames will be a primary source of ignition if they're able to come into contact with anything. But if you have that buffer, as I mentioned, and we'll talk about this as we go through the presentation, of a 30-meter buffer between the vegetation on the edge of the forest and the home, then you have a significant chance of reducing your risks of ignitability, so long as we count for the embers now, which we'll talk about throughout the presentation. So this diagram here is a really excellent tool to help you understand how fire moves through a forested area. Now we'll speak to an untreated area, which is just the natural growth that occurs, and then the fire will move through that into what we call the treatment area of the forest. And this is the area where we've taken action, we've reduced some of the hazard, and we've changed the way the composition of the forest and how fire will burn throughout that area. And what we want to represent here is a fire moving, growing into a crown fire in the center of your screen, and then now it's running into the area where we've treated those fuels. It's reverting back to a surface fire, which is lower intensity, and it's much more manageable. And as it moves closer to the home, the idea is that that fire will run out of fuel to consume, and therefore burn around the structures instead of through the structures, so long as we count for the embers. So this is the home ignition zone, and I always tell folks that if you get nothing else out of the presentation, I'd like you to walk away with a little bit of knowledge around this concept. And the home ignition zone is a really important concept to help reduce your risks, and it starts right in the immediate zone, that area from 0 meters to 1.5 meters, give or take 5 feet. That is the area that will allow for direct flame contact with your home or structure. So if we're reducing an ember's ability to ignite fuel in this area, that 0 to 1.5 meter area, we're now reducing the fire's opportunity to have that direct conduit to the home, that direct sort of flame contact to the home, and which would in turn cause that home to ignite. So that's the first step. We start at the home, we work our way out, and then we move into the intermediate zone, which is your 1.5 meters to 10 meters. And then finally, the extended zone, which is your 10 to 30 meters and beyond. Should you have a larger property that expands beyond 30 meters, you can impose the same concepts in the 10 to 30 meter zone all the way out to 100 meters. But again, you want to start at your home and work out to have the most impact. And now we're going to cover these zones off in a little bit more detail here as we go through. So when we're looking at the home, and we're looking at an assessment, essentially at this point, we're looking to determine what areas of the home are ignitability, and we always start are ignitable. Sorry, we always start at the roof, and the roof is your number one factor. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. The embers blowing into an area, they're going to land on your roof. If your roof is made out of cedar shakes, for example, it's going to have a high likelihood of igniting and then transferring to the rest of the home, and therefore losing the home from the transfer of embers. So if you have your asphalt shingles or your steel roof, those are all great options for you, as they're very well designed to resist fire. The other thing you want to consider is the roof cleanliness. It's how much moss and litters have accumulated. Is there pine needles on the roof that could be ignited and then potentially transferred to another part of the home? And so these are all things that we're considering here. The third factor, and we saw it in the video, we saw some gutters and some vents that were considerably, well, they were melting off, right? We know that the vinyl, from the heat of just the radiant heat of the fire, they can be impacted, they can melt and expose what's behind them. And so if you have aluminum an option rather than the vinyl, then they're going to be more resistant to that heat and therefore won't melt away. And we also know that direct flame contact on the vinyl will cause it to ignite as well. And so these are things that you want to consider when you're doing upgrades to your cottage or your home. You want to look at options that are more resistant to fire, such as the aluminum soffits. The vents, ideally, we want to have our vents screened with a 3 millimeter steel mesh. And what that will do is it'll allow, it will not allow rather the embers to enter into the home and then ignite the home from the inside out. The one exception being your dryer vent, that will be a louved vent that's necessary for that one. But the other ones we want to look at ensuring the 3 millimeter wire mesh is in there. And again, we don't want to use the vinyl because we know that the heat will simply melt through the vinyl mesh and enter the home anyways. And the other area is looking at your eaves to make sure they're closed off and not open, as you can see in that third photo towards the bottom, where some embers could accumulate into those areas. Um, that's something you want to close off with aluminum ideally. Start from the top of the home and work your way down. And so we're working down the walls now, and we can see that the exterior walls, we're looking at the building materials, right? And it's the combustibility is going to vary from structure to structure, but what we're looking at is what's, first of all, on the outside. Do we have vinyl siding? That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it depends what's behind the vinyl siding. If you have vinyl siding covering up stucco, for example, or brick, then we know that the risks to those areas are significantly lessened. Whereas if you have that vinyl siding up on aspenite, for example, now you have an opportunity for that vinyl siding to melt off and expose the aspenite behind it, which then could be more susceptible to that ember shower, which we saw in that earlier video. So things you want to consider there. Also, you want to look at the balcony, the deck, and the fences. And your flammability is going to occur where embers are able to accumulate. We know it's not going. One ember itself has a lower chance of igniting a deck, for example. But if there's a group of embers that land on the deck and are up against the home, then there's a higher probability of ignitability in that area. And so we want to take that into account. And there's all kinds of products out there that are fire resistant that you can utilize on your deck, or you can switch out when you do upgrade your deck. You want to consider maybe different materials if it's something that's affordable for you at that time, beyond wood. That could reduce your susceptibility to wildland fire as well. But even if you are using wood, there are products out there available to reduce your flammability. Fences, if you have wood fences that go right up against the home or cottage, that's something you want to consider as well. That's going to allow a fire to transfer directly to the home. And so what we've seen often is you'll have maybe a wood fence that goes to a certain point, and then when you get into that immediate zone, that 5 feet from the house, maybe you just have one section of a chain link fence or a different type of material that isn't combustible. And so those are different options that you can utilize as you're upgrading, or when you're considering to upgrade certain elements of the home. And we talked a little bit about openings, but windows and doors are a big one as well. We want to make sure that we have double pane windows at best, at the very least. Those single pane windows, which we see on older style homes, are very susceptible to heat fracture, and they can simply collapse just with the radiant heat coming off of a wildland fire. And that creates the opening for embers to enter into the home, if not direct flames to enter into the home. And so your tempered is the best, and your double pane windows are a good option as well to reduce that potential. Now we've looked at the house itself. We're looking at the foundation itself, and now we're looking at nearby combustibles and things like firewood piles. And this is a common one, right? Folks like to have the firewood easily accessible, right up against the house in many cases, and it's easy to bring it out in and out of the home. And and I understand that completely. But there are different options. We often, the FireSmart program will recommend to have your firewood pile into the extended zone whenever possible. But we're very flexible as well. And one thing I would suggest is if that's not a realistic approach for you, there's other options for you. You can look at steel boxes, for example, so that if an ember lands on that box, it's not going to ignite your entire pile and then transfer to the home. I've heard of folks using welding blankets to cover up the wood. Now that will have a limited impact, but it is reducing the ember's ability to ignite that wood pile, right? Whereas if you have a surface fire approaching the home, it might still be impacted. But every step you take is reducing your risks, and so I highly recommend taking those steps in order to reduce those risks. The next one we want to talk about, we talked about fences, scrap lumber, same concept as the firewood. Window boxes are another one that folks don't tend to think about, right? But if you have a window box that's susceptible to wildland fire, it ignites, an ember lands in there and ignites, and it has direct contact. Now your flame potential has a direct contact with your home, and your risks are again increased to losing that home. And then we want to look at the position of the slope and setback here. This one a little bit obviously challenging to mitigate, but the what FireSmart calls for is when we have a house that's on a slope or close to the edge of a slope, we just increase our home ignition zone ratios. For example, we call for 5 feet in the immediate zone. Well, maybe we'll go to 8 feet in this zone if we're out on a slope, because fire moves faster uphill. It's allowed to preheat some fuels ahead of it, and therefore it's going to move quite a bit quicker upwind or up the hill, much in the same way as it would on a windy day, for example, having that sort of extra momentum. Okay, so now we're looking outwards from the home. We've looked at the home, we've done our assessment of the building materials, and we've looked at the foundation of the home. And now we're scanning outwards from there. And what we're doing is we're looking at all vegetation that's in the area. But what we're paying closer attention to is the type of vegetation that we're looking at, and how it's laid out across the home ignition zone. And so the first thing I'd like to point out is long grasses and conifer trees. These are anything with a needle component tends to burn with more volatility, whereas anything with that leaf component tends to retain more water and therefore are less likely to be ignited by a wildland fire. And generally speaking, we can keep a lot of those hardwoods and sort of high moisture content fuels right up against the house because we're not worried about those transferring fire. Whereas if you have a cedar tree or juniper tree right up against the structure, that's going to be able to receive embers, ignite, and then transfer to the home or structure. So we want to make sure that we're analyzing all these factors. So how is the fire going to expose the home? What type of fuel is there? What size of it? What's the moisture characteristic? The chemical content of it. Whereas if it's that really resiny type of fuel, it's going to hold fire. There's also the horizontal and vertical sort of spacing of those trees. Like if you have a spruce tree that's needle bearing all the way down to the ground, you have an opportunity for a surface fire now to candle up that tree and spread vertically and have a little bit more intensity, or quite a bit more intensity in those types of situations. So those are all things that you're looking at. Things you can do with that if you're not willing to cut that tree right down, or there might be an option to use some pruning techniques to reduce your risks in that respect. So when we do our assessments, we're going to use three, and I'll argue four, vegetation management strategies to impact how that fire is going to spread. The first one is fuel removal, so we can simply take it out of there. The next one is fuel reduction, so we can reduce the amount of fuel that's available to burn in a specific area. And fuel conversion, which is my favorite. We don't want to have a barren landscape, but we can simply switch out what is growing in a given area to reduce our risks. But the fourth one is also a strategy that I wanted to mention. It's worth mentioning. It's called isolation. So if you have a group of coniferous trees, for example, that you're not ready to cut down. Maybe there's some sentimental value. You planted one with your grandfather, or whatever the case may be, and it holds some value where it is. You can look at the isolation option, and removing things from around it, so that if it does ignite, then that particular tree, for example, won't be able to spread uh, to another area outside of where it ignited. So we just got to be careful of how close that is to your structures. So let's get into the nitty gritty of each zone here now, and talk about them in a little bit more detail to help situate yourselves here. Again, the home ignition zone, immediate zone, is the 0 to 1.5 meters, so give or take 5 feet, and that's your immediate zone, and it should be fuel free. And when I'm saying fuel, I don't mean just your coniferous trees and your tall grasses and things that can receive fire that way. I mean also your man-made fuels, such as things like your welcome mat. As simple as that it might sound, if your welcome mat is combustible, an ember lands on it, ignites, and then spreads to the home, you now lost your home because of a welcome mat, right? So it's the little things like that that can really have a big impact. You switch out that welcome mat for something non-combustible, you're in a much better situation. Your deck, it counts as part of your home. So you'll see in the photo that the extended zone, or the immediate zone rather, wraps around the deck. So you want to treat your deck as part of the home, and you want to put away things like patio furniture, where if an ember landed on it and ignited it, it could transfer to your deck, right? So things like that you can reduce. We want to create an environment that does not sustain a surface fire, and therefore the fire would burn around your structures. We also want to make sure that there's no opportunity for flames to have direct contact with the structure, which means that 5 feet or 1.5 meter area is free of anything that can burn, essentially, and transfer to the home. That radiant heat, that's the heat. If you think about a campfire, that's the heat coming off your campfire. We want to limit that, and that's what that 30-meter zone buffer is. So if you have the big raging forest fire that goes up to that 30-meter extended area, it still doesn't have enough radiant heat to ignite your home, because it's not in that area for long enough to ignite the home through radiant heat, is what research is showing us. And so when you do have a tree within the home ignition zone ignite, for example, you'll see the coniferous tree sort of at the edge of the extended zone. If that were to ignite, it still has a limited amount of radiant heat which could transfer to the home. So you're still improving your odds by having sort of one tree as opposed to a clump of them exposing the home. And then what you want to do in this home, as far as your strategies, you want to do fuel removal and conversion as your principal strategies in this area to make sure that you're reducing your risks. So in this area, you want to choose landscaping options that work best. And again, I like to use the conversion here in this area so that you're not looking at a barren landscape around your home. If you have that mulch product around your home, maybe you swap it out for some rocks, or there's some different colored rocks that you can use. Rock gardens, for example, that you can explore. Maybe you have that cedar tree that's in there. Well, maybe if you remove it and you replace it with something else that can go right up against the house, something that retains water well, something that's short, low growing, sort of has that non-resinous component to it. That's something that you can put right into that area. But what you want to avoid, as I mentioned, the junipers, the cedars, the conifers, any tall grasses. You can have grass right up against the home, but ideally you want it to be trimmed down to less than 10 centimeters. And you want to remove that combustible bark, that mulch, if you will, and move it to another area. We know it burns at a low intensity, so it might be more suited for a flower garden in the extended zone, for example, and it might not cause you any grief in those areas. As we move into the intermediate zone here, what we're trying to do is create an environment that'll only it'll only support a fire of lower intensity, and a low rate of spread, if you will. So you can have fire in the zone. It's just that we want it to run into that. So this is the 1.5 to 10 meter zone, the intermediate zone. We want that fire, if it is burning in this area, once it reaches that 1.5 or 5 meter area from the home, it has no fuel left to consume, and now will burn around the home. That's the idea behind the intermediate zone. So you just take a reasoned approach to this zone. We don't need to completely clear cut the zone. We want to consider your values as a homeowner and as a resident. Your visual qualities, any sort of wildlife habitats or wildlife viewing options that you have on your property. These are things that there is room for flexibility in the FireSmart program, especially once we get into the intermediate zone. Use that isolation component if you do have some coniferous trees or some junipers or cedars in this area that you don't want to cut down. The isolation option still remains there, provided that you're accounting for that flame length. That flame can't come in direct contact with the home. So if it does burn, how far is that flame length, and what does it look like when it burns? Right, those are things you're thinking about when you are looking at isolation options. As we move into the extended zone, now what we're looking to do is create an environment that will reduce a wildland fire's intensity once it enters into this zone. So this is going back to that diagram I showed initially. This is the area where the treatment area, where the fire is turning from a crown fire now into a surface fire. So this would involve a lot of things like understory thinning. And the photograph you have on the screen here shows you a nice before and after option, right? We're not clear cutting an area, but we're selectively removing specific conifers, and you want to account for the young and the old. You don't want to remove all the young saplings and have sort of the one type of forest with all mature, but you don't also want to just take all the mature trees out either and leave just the saplings. You want to have a nice variety if you can. And ideally in this area, if we can thin it out, you want to space. FireSmart Canada calls for a spacing of 3 meters between the crowns of trees where possible. And what that does is allows the fire, if it does candle up the tree, it'll have a reduced intensity. It won't be able to spread from treetop to treetop easily with that spacing. And what they're also saying is if you can prune the tree to 2 meters, if you have a tall enough tree. Now, keep in mind when you are pruning trees, you want to leave at least 1/3 of the crown. Otherwise, it could die off. But if you're able to prune to 2 meters, the surface fire occurring in that area potentially can pass right underneath that crown of that tree, depending on the species, and not impact it or have a limited impact to that species. So those are really good options in the extended zone. So my recommendation here again would be just prune and space your conifers. Make sure if you do have grass in this area, again, keep it trimmed, pick up any debris off the ground. But this one here, we're looking at, again, it's thinning. Primary use here is thinning, and make sure that you're disposing of your slash and any sort of debris that is built up after you've done your cleanup. If you leave those on the ground, you're only sort of leaving debris for the fire to consume as it comes through the area. So. And again, once you're into this, it's always start from the home and work your way out. So you want to start at that sort of 10-meter area and work towards 30 meters, because it's all about keeping those structures free of reducing the risks to those structures, right? Okay, so I do want to speak a little bit about maintenance now, and this is some folks don't necessarily keep this in mind when they're going through the FireSmart program. Is essentially once we've done all the work, it doesn't end there. It's just a matter of keeping up that work. So that could be just mowing your lawn, or it could be just raking it every sprint to make sure that we picked up all that debris, maintaining that separation for in your extended zone, that 3-meter spacing we talked about, all these things. And it's just a periodic maintenance piece that allows you to continually reduce your risks from the impacts of the wildland fire. Now, I do want to take a moment to introduce another video. Um, this particular video, it's about 10 minutes long. Yes, I'll have enough time. I'll play about 7 minutes of this video just to give everyone an idea. It really helps bring the whole concept together with some of the science. And I'll just let it play, and we'll let Jack speak for himself here.
I don't know how soon sound starts, Shane, but I'm not hearing any.
Okay. So I do have some sound here that's not going right now. That's okay. I'll switch it over on my screen. Just bear with me one moment, folks. Okay. Audio. Okay, let's try this. See if this goes now. Start that over. Can you hear that, Michelle?
No, we're not. How interesting. You test and then the audio doesn't want to play. You may need to stop sharing that and reshare it.
Oh, no problem, Michelle. This video is supplementary, anyways. It was
Okay.
just really helping me sort of bring home the point. But just to summarize the video, essentially, Jack's talking about how the work in the home ignition zone can really reduce the risks, and they're showing that it's the little things, really the mostly the little things that will ignite homes. And they go on to show homes that have survived major wildland fires and some of the steps that homeowners took. And it was exactly the things that we've just gone through in the presentation is moving, putting away the patio furniture, changing out the welcome mats, changing out that building construction. So going from cedar shake shingles to the asphalt shingles or the steel roof composition, switching out the single pane windows to the double pane windows when they do their upgrades, things like that. And they start to prove some of the concepts that we've been speaking to here throughout the presentation today.
What I'll suggest, Shane, is if you can make the video available to us, we'll just ensure that that can go out with the post-event information to all of our attendees.
No, that's
And I do
great.
think you've got a little prompt that's on your slides at the moment that you can probably select
Oh,
hide for. That's just a
thank you.
remnant of what you were
Thank
doing there.
you. And
Cheers.
I'm just gonna switch my audio back to my headphones as well. Just give me one moment, folks. Okay. Just making sure you can hear me, Michelle.
Yes, I certainly can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll carry on here. So all that to say, yeah, we're not helpless, right? There's no guarantees with any of this, but certainly we're continually reducing our risks with every single step that we take. Every action that you take, especially in that immediate zone, is having an incremental impact on reducing your risk. You're never going to get to 100%, risk free, but we've seen again with the numbers that we've seen through the research, you see that 85 to 90% of homes can be fire resistant if they're taking the steps that we talk about here in the FireSmart program. That effective home ignition zone treatment dramatically increases your chances of survival. So we're not helpless. Just to take a little bit of action and incrementally induce your risk. And the idea is essentially the homes on the edge of the community. If everybody takes action and prevents and reduces the risks, those homes on the edge of the community can act as a fire break in a sense, right? If there's no fuels to consume in and around those homes, that's essentially what a fire break is. And so we can do that with some actions at the homeowner level. It's something that we all have to do together as well. We're at a point now where we're seeing these massive wildland fires, and agencies such as mine generally do a very good job of responding to them. But when we've got massive wildland fires that are really extreme conditions that we see from time to time in the summer months, they can be very challenging, and it takes a whole of society approach to manage these fires. And folks at the homeowner levels taking actions in and around their property can help with that process as well, right? Everybody has a role to play with wildland fire mitigation. I do want to take a little bit of time here to speak to some of the resources available for folks. So this one here is a Wildfire Community Preparedness Day grant. And this is an excellent grant for folks that are just starting their FireSmart journey. I would say anybody who's interested in getting involved in the FireSmart program, apply for this grant between November 1st and January 31st through firesmartcanada.ca. Any individual, organization, or community can apply for this grant. It's $500, but what it does is allows you sort of a little bit of funding to get folks together, whether that's for a day of doing some work in the home ignition zone, whether that's for a barbecue public information session for folks in the area. It's a really good way to get the community members together to start talking about FireSmart. And the nice part about it is after you've received the award, you can apply every year and you can continually build off the work that you've done in the year before. I know $500 isn't a lot, but it is a good starting point to help people at least get started on their journey. So I highly recommend taking up FireSmart Canada on this grant. And the province of Ontario also supplements this grant. So the more folks that apply for this, the more sort of the more opportunity there is for us to work together and help communities become more resilient. The next step that you can take once you've begun your FireSmart journey, I often say if you have a community group together already, such as a cottage association, for example, would be a perfect place to start a local FireSmart committee. And a local FireSmart committee can consist of homeowners, residents, fire professionals, land managers, planners, really anyone who's interested in taking action in the community. And what that can do is it can help you start talking about the home ignition zone opportunities in and around the community. Maybe there's some aging, some members of the community that are aging and can't necessarily get the work done on their property. Well, then it takes a whole community to come together to help each other. And so these are areas where the FireSmart community can help chip in and really start pushing fire mitigation in the community. And then with the FireSmart committee, there's also opportunities to go out and look at. FireSmart has a recognition program called the Neighborhood Recognition Program. Now, at this point, there's no funding associated with this program, but what it does do is it supports a local FireSmart committee who are taking steps to in their community to reduce the risks. It'll support you through recognition of you'll get a plaque, for example, such as you see in this photo, and you'll get some recognition sort of at the national level for taking actions in your community and continually getting together and doing things that are going to help your community remain resilient to wildland fire. Some more resources available to you, and my favorite one is the FireSmart 101 course. It's a very short, it's only about an hour long, but it really gives you the fundamentals of FireSmart in sort of a quick delivery, easy understand. It's highly interactive as well. I highly recommend it, FireSmart 101 at firesmartcanada.ca. There's also a whole bunch of resources like the FireSmart Begins at Home manual, which again is another good introductory manual to help you get started. The FireSmart Guide to Landscaping, that one is really it gives you those options, hundreds of options for which vegetation that you could plant in and around your home or in the ignition zone that will be less susceptible to wildland fire. It also talks, there's some resources to get you started on your path for the neighborhood recognition program. The home ignition zone self-assessment and poster. There's a last minute FireSmart checklist available as well. There's a FireSmart home development guide for new construction. Wildfire resilience best practices checklist as well for homes that are for new constructions. And then there's of course a slew of FireSmart fact sheets to help you get started as well. And I do also recommend anyone who's looking to get started with their neighborhood recognition program or really have questions about the home ignition zone. I can be a resource for you as well, and I'm happy to help guide you through your journey. I just want to touch on this briefly for any community planners out there. This is what's called the Community Wildland Fire Protection Plan. And this plan consists of a 5-step planning process. It's done through the lens of a community planning sort of perspective, not necessarily the homeowners level. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but in case there are any planners out there, this is an excellent tool to help bring in wildland fire into your emergency response planning documents. And so if there's anyone out there looking to obtain this type of document, please do reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help support that process for your community as well. So I'll end my presentation here today with 10 tips for you to really help get you started on your property. Um, the big one here, I would say, once you get out of here, go and download the FireSmart Begins at Home app. And what it does is it provides you with a self-assessment. It walks you through a self-assessment for your home and property, and it's a really effective tool to help you get started. It really does give you a bit of a step-by-step to help you sort of understand what to look for first. The next thing I'd like to speak to here is remove your combustible material from under your decks. I know, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well, is we all store materials under our deck. Well, if those materials are combustible and the deck isn't closed off, sheathed off, if you will, embers can get in under there, ignite that material, and then ignite your deck, which will in turn ignite your home. So it's very important that any of those materials under there are removed and left and brought outside of the immediate zone into another area, into another storage area. And any debris that's under there, you want to try to rake it and maintain that area to be a non-combustible zone. Or alternatively, you can close that area off, sheet that area off to reduce the ember's ability to get into that area. Your gutters. We saw this in the video. You want to clean and maintain your gutters and your roof, and keep your decks and balconies clear from leaves and debris. We know that those embers will ignite that debris, and if you have a fire in your gutter and you have the vinyl gutter, it's going to melt and it's going to potentially transfer that fire to the home. So those are seems like they're small things, but they are very important to reduce embers' a chance to ignite in and around that home. Keep grass and weeds cut to below 10 centimeters. I think we spoke to that already. Plant wildfire resistant vegetation to reduce the flammability of your landscape. And that's especially important in that first 5 feet, 1.5 meters from the home. And the landscaping guide that I spoke to earlier is available on firesmartcanada.ca. Excellent guide to help you choose your vegetation wisely. We spoke to the 3mm screens for external vents, except for your dryers. This is going to keep the embers out of your home and again, reduce the risks of the fire starting inside your home and burning outwards that way. Make sure you're not replacing your lubed vents though on your dryers. That one, it is a safety risk if you go and switch the lubed vents out. So we want to make sure we're not doing that. We're pruning trees to create a 2-meter clearance from the ground up so that the fire essentially can pass underneath of it. Again, conifer trees only. I know this photo shows some leaves on there, but we're not worried about hardwoods. We are worried about the coniferous trees, even the birch. The birch bark might burn a little bit and create embers, but we're less concerned with those types of vegetations. It's the coniferous trees that really put out the radiant heat and produce the long flame front. So those are the ones that we're more concerned with. Firewood, move that to 10 meters away from your home, or look at alternatives to reduce the risks, such as the steel box, as I mentioned earlier. This is a big one, and I didn't touch on this yet, surprisingly, but hold your sheds and other structures to the same standard as your home. And what we mean by that is your shed has an immediate, intermediate, and extended zone as well. And the reason for that is that if your shed ignites, then that now becomes an exposure to your home. So we need to hold the same standards around our outbuildings as we do, no matter no matter the value of that outbuilding. It's still going to be potentially exposing your home to additional radiant heat, which could increase your odds of ignitability. So hold the same standards. You'll often have zones overlap, but that's okay. As long as we're holding that immediate, intermediate, and extended zone for each of these areas, then we're creating ourselves the best opportunity. And have a wildfire evacuation plan for the household. So that's as easy as having a quick conversation with everyone and understanding where you're going to what steps you're going to take if you do have to evacuate the area. Maybe it's having a 24-hour bag ready to go at a moment's notice, or whatever the case may be. But have that conversation with your family, with the people living in your home, so that you have a plan in place. So if the wildfire occurs, you're getting evacuated in a moment's notice, you already have thought about what you need to bring with you. And last but not least, there's a last minute checklist for protecting your home and property. This again, I'll distribute with my presentation afterwards, but a really good sheet to help you sort of um, prepare for a wildland fire. And some of the takeaways here is just have that ready to go kit. Always monitor the conditions, and follow the advice of local authorities. And when time allows it, complete a scan around your home and property and take the steps to remove combustible materials where you can. And again, if time allows it, check your vents and roof, the foundation of exterior walls, all that sort of stuff that you want to try to take in account for. So again, I'll distribute this with my presentation, but I will leave that up on the screen, but I'll pass it over to Michelle, and maybe we can open up the Q&A period.
That sounds wonderful. What I might do then is ask you if you don't mind stopping the share of your slides.
Sure.
Shane, I'm going to get Adam to re-engage, and we'll just keep up a Q&A slide for the next few minutes. Stay with us if you can for a few minutes beyond the hour, as there's lots of questions. We understand if you have to get back to the rest of your day at 1 o'clock, but I think we'll hang in for just an extra 5 or so if we can to get through some of these. Lots of good comments and questions. One or two related to the question of sprinkler systems and how they could be a component of your plan for fire prevention.
Sorry, one more time, Michelle. That was my audio kicked out there.
Oh, okay. The questions were about sprinkler systems and the
Mhm.
placing of, sprinkler on the top of the house, for example. FOCA does have actually a sponsor who sells that kind of equipment, and so people are asking what you think of that.
Yeah, and I get a lot of questions about sprinkler systems, and the best response I can give you is do FireSmart first, and then look at sprinkler options. And the reason I say that is because if you have a cedar tree right up against your home and you're utilizing a sprinkler system, if you're not getting the proper coverage, or if an ember is able to come into the area and ignite that cedar tree, you're still having the issues of that direct flame contact up against the home. Whereas if you take the concepts that we talked about today in the FireSmart program, you've now reduced that risk, number one. And if you're going to utilize the sprinkler system in addition to that, you're now increasing your odds even more. So I would say don't rely 100% on the sprinkler system. I would say employ the FireSmart system first, and then couple that with the sprinkler system if that's the route you'd like to take.
Great. Early on in your presentation, you had a graphic that showed how a fire that starts in a wooded area would begin at the ground level and then would become a crown fire. And then
Mhm.
you described how you would have hopefully a fire smart property so that it could prevent going back to being a ground fire. So there was a question about why would a crown fire revert to being a ground fire?
It's all about the fuels. So essentially, in order to have a crown fire, you need the right subset of fuels. You need a laddering fuel. You need the right wind conditions. You need a whole number of things to come together. And so what we do is we are changing the composition of the fuels available to burn. And so the fire is now having to revert back to a surface fire because it doesn't have the right composition of fuels in order to sustain a crown fire. In order to have a crown fire, you need to have a sustained surface fire, coupled with vertical opportunities for that fire to get into the crown, so that being laddering fuels. So when we prune to 2 meters, we've reduced the fire's ability to climb those trees and become a crown fire. And so those things coupled together allow us to reduce the opportunities of a fire to remain a crown fire.
Another tree related question, just somebody asking, what about balsam fir? Where do they sit on the risk level?
Balsam fir is a coniferous tree, which is a high risk tree. That
Yeah.
that one is a needle bearing tree, high risk. I would say not in the immediate zone. Ideally, if you do want to maintain them in the intermediate zone, no problem. I would say use the isolation strategies and prune it as well, up to 2 meters. And in those cases, as long as if it does ignite, you're trying to predict the amount of flame coming off of it and if that would contact your home. If you have that 5 foot buffer, you're not too bad. But if you have a mature balsam fir and it's not pruned, I would say that's you're still on the edge of things there. So you want to look at try to estimate how far that fire's flame front is going to extend when it does ignite.
And so while we're on this topic, I mean, we're discussing pruning, but also the possible removal of trees. So we do want to emphasize that every municipality has their own regulations around tree removal, and you need to be aware of those before you start doing things like taking trees down. And also just that FOCA, obviously our environmental focus has
Yes.
always been around naturalizing areas, naturalizing shorelines and naturalizing, around your property. We want to clarify that this is not apples or oranges. You want to strike a balance and find a middle way between what is good for your surrounding environment and what is safe for your family and your property.
Yes,
Um,
and thanks for that, Michelle. And that's a really good point. Is that we do have a lot of flexibility in the FireSmart program for just that reason, right? We want to ensure that the bylaws are being followed and that any shoreline rules that are in place are also being followed. So it's very important to check with those before you start cutting.
Very good. Question about fireworks and where does the fire service stand on fireworks and how much of a threat are they?
So we know that fireworks do start wildland fires from time to time. There are often municipal bylaws in place under fireworks. That said, there aren't any provincial legislations that address fireworks at this point. So I don't have anything other than that to add. I would say that if you are putting off fireworks, be very careful. We do often see wildland fires started by fireworks. So it's very important, and you could be held responsible for the cost of extinguishing a fire if you're found to have been the one who started through fireworks.
True. Okay, well, we're already just past the hour, but another question is several questions around the question of, well, are there experts who can come and assess my property, or are there people like Shane who can come and talk to my community group? And I think from perhaps what you've said in the meantime is that it becomes a community project to educate yourself first and then those around you, and that is the reason for things like the FireSmart Community Grant, which one of our attendees, actually Bay of Islands, said they got one of those. So
Oh, great. That's
so there
excellent.
you go. Keep your
That's
eyes peeled to
excellent.
the FOCA Eeler in November. We will give you the link where you can go to apply for next year's grants. But just
Mhm.
yeah, maybe something to that the questions of who are the experts? How do I know what to
Yeah,
do?
so certainly we're still building capacity in the FireSmart area right now at the province, and so we have a small team. There's about 6 of us right now working with the program across the province. So we're still building capacity, but that's not to say we don't want to support your FireSmart events. We're doing our best to get out to every community event that we can get to in order to support the FireSmart program. And so I would say start with that. Get the FireSmart Begins at Home app. That'll really help you walk through your property as well and give you sort of that starting point. But focus at the homeowner level and go through those concepts that we've talked to today in reducing your risks. There's some FireSmart training communities training available if you are looking to take the next step. Periodically, we put that training on, but that's designed for folks that are looking to be a community champion, learn the concepts of FireSmart and bring it back to their committees or their communities and start growing a program locally, a sort of a volunteer concept in that respect. So anybody who's looking to take that step, please do reach out to me, and I can help get you started on your journey that way as well.
Super. So Shane, we want to thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge today. And we know that there's an awful lot for all of us to learn, but this is a good starting point. And we will, of course, follow up with all of these links and good information. Adam, could I get our next slide now, please? Yes, when your slide presentation goes dormant because you've been chatting for 20 minutes on the question and answer slide. So I do encourage everybody to register for FOCA's next webinar. This will be a cottage succession seminar, and it is free to all FOCA members and $30 to those who are not a FOCA member. And it will be on tax strategies because, of course, of this change to the capital gains tax regulations that is pending. Next slide, please. And every time you have a cottage country question, we do hope you will visit FOCA's website. There is a search bar right there at the top of every page, and also a link for you to join our alert list. That's our monthly newsletter, and it contains links to all of our upcoming events, other fire safety resources, and lots of good cottage country details. Next slide, please. And of course, we thank everyone who is a member of your local association who are FOCA members. That makes our ongoing work possible. If by chance you are not in a FOCA member group and you are in a position to provide your additional support, we do appreciate that. If you feel you've gotten some good free information today, you can become a friend of FOCA, which is our valued annual supporter category that helps us in our environmental work. Next slide. As you leave today, you'll be taken to a short survey. We hope you can give us your impressions. That helps us with our upcoming event planning. And of course, you will receive the follow-up information tomorrow in an email. And that, I think, takes us to the final slide, which is thank you all for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. And now we will end our webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye now.